Hello and welcome back to Tea and Takeaways. My name is Vanessa de Jesus Guzman, educator of 18 years turned licensed therapist. But today I am just spilling the tea and letting you know of some takeaways from the latest Netflix documentary called Bad Influence. So I'd like to start off with just a disclaimer because unlike other videos that I've done, this is on actual real people who are still living, and the real people videos are used to make this documentary of sorts. And not only are they real people, but they're also real kids. So I wanted to start off with that because it has a slightly more educational lens or educational perspective. Because of that, because I am sensitive that these people are still living and they're still with us, and it's their faces and likeness that were used in this show. So the show is called Bad Influence. It just came out on Netflix. It's a four-part series, and it shows the real life things and the behind the scenes of what's happened or what has happened to some of these YouTube stars, which, by the way, I've never once watched these shows, nor do I really plan to. I can use my time a little bit wiser than to watch these YouTube shows. But this show definitely grabbed my curiosity because we see reality TV, right? Let's say the Kardashians. They've been on TV for a very long time. And yes, they're real people too, but they are, out there real people. And you have like Kris Jenner with Momager and really running her kids' businesses and being their manager. However, this is a little bit different because it's not reality TV that we see on TV. It's reality TV on YouTube. And it was really interesting how they showed how these momagers, specifically one mom, who was in charge of her kid and then became in charge of what they called the squad, how there was a really fine line between motivating these kids and then not letting them live their kid lives. And it shows how at first it started very innocently, but especially when the kids started becoming preteens and teens, how they were really pushed to do certain things that you saw the kids were kind of like on shaky grounds, not even being fully comfortable in doing the things that, again, the mom of the main star really posed for them to do. And as I was watching it, I was like, oh my goodness, like how much of this is really being a momager? And how much of this is really exploiting these kids and then exploiting your own kid? And there were a lot of questions, which is really what I'm sharing with you today, just some educational points and through the lens of an educator and a therapist. But it was a lot of the questions that I had in my own mind as I watched this four-part series. And I was wondering, like, is this really that much different than like kid stars? I think of stars from my day who are maybe just a couple of years older than me, like Drew Barrymore, right? I mean, she had her startings in like commercials, and then like E.T. was her major breakout role, but I think she was like four. I don't know, she was very young. And then like Macaulay Culkin and all the Home Alone movies. Is it really that much different than kid stars? And obviously, if we don't lead that lifestyle, we may not know for sure. I think that there is a slight difference because these kid stars, Drew Barrymore, Macaulay Culkin, like, anybody else that started really young, they were on movies and they can turn it on and they can turn it off, and they played a part. And I think that that's really the biggest difference. Whereas these kids, they're playing themselves, they're playing their own name, their own likeness in their homes. Like they're really showing us their entire lives, regardless if some parts are scripted, but it's really them. And I think that that's really what makes the biggest difference there. Biggest thing that struck me besides the mental health part, which we'll get into it in a moment, what I really don't like is that for the kid viewer, because of our access to social media, like it makes the kid viewer stop living their lives only to pour themselves into their screens. So I think of that boy that like opens up his toys, right? And then like these kids aren't even playing with the toys themselves because they're watching someone else open up toys and play. When we were kids, maybe we didn't do that because obviously these things weren't created, for us older folks. But for these new kids, they are pouring so much more of themselves into their screens. And then from, again, a therapist lens, I think about, well, how is it that they're growing and how is it that they're developing? The viewer, obviously, if they're not doing the things that they're doing because they're watching somebody else doing them on screen. But then, more importantly, in this regard, the the YouTube stars, right? Obviously, kid stars, again, they've been doing this, but some stay out of the limelight and they lead successful lives. And again, they're playing a different part. But think about, to go back to them, Drew Barrymore had tons of troubles, Lindsay Lohan had tons of troubles. It does impact them in some way when they have to grow up on screen. And that was even a little bit removed than these kids who are literally growing up on screen. And then not even having, like, I don't know, your mom, your dad, your caregiver, they're not there all the time to see what it is that you're being told to do, told what not to do. And again, from a clinical perspective, like, their minds are still developing. So you really have to trust, if you're a parent who allows your child to be, in this case, part of the squad, you really have to trust the adults around them to do the right thing and to have their best interests at heart. And the reality is that, unfortunately, that's not always the case. In my experience as an educator of 18 years, especially working in a middle school for most of that time, I've met plenty of adults, sadly, that it's kind of like they forget that they are adults and that they have been through these stages, and that whatever they did and accomplished, they should leave in the past because their time is done as a kid. And they, like, get really involved in this kid drama, and they almost get stuck there, and they begin, as parents, interacting with their kids as if they were one of the kids. But that is a huge problem because kids see us as these people that should really be guiding them, not as these people really involved in this drama when they shouldn't be. In the second episode, I mean, you see the mom is providing the kids alcohol and then is getting drunk with the kids. That's when she kissed one of them. He even says, like, how that caused anxiety within them because they just didn't understand what was happening. They talked about having crushes. And, the show even said, like, it really violates their innocence because kids just can't turn that off and on. They're still growing up, whether it's on screen or behind the scenes. So they have a hard time of really, like, figuring out, oh, that was just a joke and we can leave it there, or that was just acting and we can leave it there. That continues again because you're not playing a part, you're playing yourself. So they were pressured to do certain things. They didn't know how to act in certain situations because they haven't encountered that in real life. So when your true self or your true persona hasn't developed, that's not okay for the kids because then they get lost in, wait, what's fake and what's real? And obviously, we've all seen the science that it's addicting, right? Like, how many likes you get, how many subscribers you get, but then past those vanity metrics, and I mean it's vanity up to a certain point because when you have so much subscribers and so many likes and so many views, then you get into, well, how much money are you making from these brand deals? And the show said they were making about $50,000 a month, and some of them more depending on, how big they were. So that is also a little bit messy when you are the star and you're 13, let's say, and you're making money, but then, where does that money go and who's paying for it? And is your parent threatening you to stay or to go, to stay because you want to make more money, or to go because now it's doing damage? But then what about all that money that's being left on the table? It's really just like, a mind explosion there. They talked about how one of these kids, the main star, had a stalker. And that is scary because even though we may not see these things happen every day, they most certainly do. And I mean, the main mom, she was even shipping out, whether they were used or not. I don't want to get into it, who really knows, but the mom was shipping underwear to men. I mean, who does that? Kids did mention that all of this does take a toll on their mental health. And I mean, when you're telling kids again to, like, make out, it's not okay for them when they're doing it scripted again in their own lives and then throwing it back to the viewer. when they're young, they don't understand this is scripted, because they see the kids for who they are and don't understand that it's like a show to really, whatever gets more views at the end of the day. And it was traumatizing, they said on the show. The kids were afraid to talk about what was happening. And then they were afraid of like the retribution, like what would happen if you did speak out, or even the parents. What would happen if the parents spoke out? And then they were going to be not only like, listed from blacklisted from the group, right? The squad, but then everything that followed, the lack of money, the lack of views. And when you've really put your eggs all in one basket and trying to make that your kid's life and the way that your family is going to gain income as a stream of revenue, it's really hard when you don't have it. So I had a lot of wonderings. The first half was really focused on the culture of the squad and everything that happens. And then the second two episodes were really focused on the lawsuits that came about. Um, and everything that came out of the fallout that came from the lawsuits that were brought up. I mean, the social emotional bullying by their friends, and then like because they're, public figures to a degree, then the rest of the world hates them in the comments. And what kid is going to stay out of the comments? Everybody wants to know, like, well, what are they saying? How is it impacting me? And it's all out there for people to see. And then again, the viewer doesn't understand what's happening. So they have all these hurtful comments that sometimes they put on there and is really then hurtful and harmful to the YouTube star. And then that becomes your inner narrative, right? Like when I act like this, people are going to think of me like that, when that really may not be the case. But then that gets stuck. And then that drives your every move and that drives your thought process for the rest of your life. And that can be so traumatizing and so damaging. There were kids telling stories of how that main mom fooled around and again, like had sexual innuendos and really like sexually assaulted these kids, but in such a way that they didn't know, what was happening, and in such a way that then they were scared to ever share what was happening. One kid even said that they sleep with a knife under their pillow, and you could tell, she was like, I don't know if I should even say this, but you could tell she was somewhat embarrassed because of now that high level of trauma and anxiety that she has to live with because of everything she experienced from being in this environment for so very long. But even with this lawsuit being settled, for some of the members, this was not everybody that went around, about it this way. But I really think about, again, how it impacts these kids. Like, there's no admission. Some of them weren't even involved. How do you carry that now for the rest of your life? And what I find to be the most sad and the most shocking is that the main star, I guess, who's still putting herself out there, is on sites that adults can subscribe to get exclusive content of minors. And that is just shocking, not because this child, right? I don't know if she's 18, I don't think so, not because she's putting herself out there, because she is a child. Even as a young adult, you're not fully formed yet, in your brain, but that her mom allows it to. And that's where I guess the biggest wondering is, what do you love more? Do you love the mental, emotional, physical wellness and stability of your child? Or are you chasing the money more, that you're willing to put your child half naked on screen just because the dollars are rolling in? So there are not really a lot of answers, besides the fact that this definitely is traumatizing. This is very impacting. And if you're a parent who puts your child out there, just think about how that is impacting them for better or for worse mentally for their future, how things again become their inner narrative, and how they're going to navigate their future based upon their childhood experiences, which we know drive everything. And if your child is not the star, but the viewer. So that's where I'm coming from as a mom who his kid is on YouTube, obviously. They learn great things, but when they're viewing things, how important it is, even if you don't have answers, you don't have to have answers. What you do have to have is the time to sit with your kid. Listen to your kid. Let them tell you about the nonsense that you may not care for that they're watching, but be somewhat involved and at least have these conversations, even if you don't watch or see anything that they're actually watching, at least have the conversations of what's real and what is scripted, of online safety, of making sure that they're making good choices, of making sure that you do have some idea. Hopefully, you're on parental controls and what they're watching and what they expose themselves to when they think that they're making an innocent video, but then have like your school paraphernalia in the back, and then somebody knows where they're going to school and can take it from there. Just have these conversations of safety. Again, TV, YouTube, social media, they do provide such great things, but we are still the parents and we still have a job to do. So those are my long-winded rant, string of rant thoughts on the show Bad Influencer, found on Netflix right now. If you have kids who are on YouTube, I highly encourage you to watch it just so that you may be somewhat aware of what other kids out there are going through, but hopefully you're a little bit more aware of what your child is viewing, and that can lead to these conversations. So this one was much more serious, like the one on pop culture, that are a little bit more at ease. But we have to take the good with the bad and both sets of extremes. So come next time, we still have to finish up on Good American Family. Again, a new thing is coming out on Bravos. I can't wait for the Real Housewives to come back. I don't watch all of them, just my state, but they're pretty fun. But anyway, if you have any comments, if you have any recommendations for shows, if you have any thoughts on this, please leave them in the comments. We can engage in conversation, and I look forward for when you join me next time. See ya.